The music tonight is Lola's Suite 7, Collection for Piano and Narration, in the style of a live radio show. The work was commissioned by the Design Museum for their 2009 Hussein Chalayan exhibition. Lola interviewed visitors to the exhibition and collected what she calls people poetry. The words of her interviewees then triggered the music. She commissioned John Kennedy to create illustrations from the narrations, and his drawings further triggered her musical composition. As part of the project, the museum made 2 books of the people poetry, with John Kennedy's illustration on the cover, and these are held in the Design Museum library. One of the books is here on display tonight. Please feel free to browse through it. Lola invited Mihir Bose, the celebrated broadcaster, author, and journalist, whose voice she had admired from afar, to perform the spoken words at the world premiere of the composition at the museum. And we're delighted that Mihir is with us tonight for this, the 4th performance of the composition. We are also delighted that the artist John Kennedy, who lives in Sydney, happens to be visiting London, and we were speaking about his work to us. This is the penultimate concert of Lola's 7 Fridays, presented by Markson Pianos. Each concert has been introduced by a guest speaker, and tonight our guest is Antonio Capelao, curator of Bisha Gallery, and like Hussein Chalayan, the inspiration behind what we are going to hear tonight. Antonio has migrated to London for cultural reasons, a subject on which I'm sure he will say more. So over to Antonio Capelao.
Good evening. I'm honored to introduce tonight's performance, titled Collections by Lola Perrin, inspired by the work of Hussein Chalayan, which deals with migration and displacement. Chalayan was born in Cyprus and came to London at the age of 1, returning to Cyprus at the age of 5, and then coming back to London when he was 12. He has spent most of his life in London, but he considers himself a Turkish Cypriot, coming from a country with a history of political turmoil, who has moved from one island to another. Although he was first drawn to architecture, it was his fascination for the human body, which he developed as a child, that formed the basis of his studies, fashion design at Central St. Martin's, and his acclaimed career as a fashion designer. When I think of Hussein Chalayan, I think of his collections titled Afterwards, which also inspired Lola to write the music she's going to play for us tonight. As a student of design and architecture, I was often exposed to afterwards imagery, not just because of its extreme beauty, but for the functionality of the designs. The Afterwards collection, Garments That Become Objects, it isn't just about beauty and practicality. It was inspired in the experiences of the Turkish Cypriots' horror of having to flee their homes at the time of war. Chalayan took inspiration from members of his family and other fellow patriots who were subject to ethnicity cleansing in Cyprus prior to 1974, in attempts to annex Cyprus to Greece. After conversations with his family about this period of their lives, Chalayan explored the idea how we may want to hide our possessions, or how we may want to carry them with us on departure in such an ordeal. The result was the creation of a living room where clothes were disguised as chair covers, suitcases as chairs, and each object in the room fitted into a special pocket, which was specifically designed to contain them. The video makes me think of a 1970s version of the movie Stepford Wives. Chalayan's work is about ideas, And his philosophy, in just a few words, it's about an exploration, a journey, storytelling. This makes me think of my own journey and story. I'm Portuguese descent, born in Mozambique, where my paternal family settled for 2 generations, and my mother moved there because she married my father. I lived in Maputo as a child in the 1970s, and like Chalayan's family, we and other Portuguese people living there had often to flee from our homes, leaving our possessions behind to avoid the conflicts between the Frelimo and the Portuguese army in the fight for the independence of Mozambique. In 1979, we moved to the north of Portugal, a small place in the coast called Viana do Castelo, where I lived as a teenager until 1989. As Chalaya put it in one of his interviews, the more isolated you are from the rest of the world, the more curious you become and the more you want to discover. And I have always been innately curious person, fueling this even further. This is exactly how I felt in that small city in Portugal. And as I turned 15 years of age, isolated and curious, I started traveling by myself around Europe during summer holidays. When I was 18 and about to go to university to study international relations, because that's what my friend was going to study and my parents were okay with it, I decided to come to London for 3 months to study and practice the English language. 3 months, it's now 22 years. And London and the UK became my home and my country of choice. There are lots of similarities between the Portuguese and the English. We are oldest friends in written history. The Methuen Treaty, signed in 1703, which was an offensive military and commercial treaty between Portugal and England as part of the War of the Spanish Succession. The Portuguese royal family exiled and is buried here when they fled Portugal in the early 20th century, to name but a few examples. My personal link with England comes from a very young age. My father was a British leyland importer for the southeast of Africa. There was an English speaker around, and there was always an English speaker around, and my parents were keen that we started learning the language as soon as we could. The first years I lived in London, I did a lot of traveling around the world, and I was free and living in a city with one of the busiest airports in the world, and I decided to make the most of it. I used to go on trips of up to 4 to 6 months, like, for instance, flying from London to Australia via Japan and returning through South Africa. I have always been very curious, and I wanted to know and I want to see the world, find new places, see how people live, understand some of the things I study, hear about and imagine, etc. I never thought much of why I'm so curious. It feels normal. I'm Portuguese. We were the great discoverers of contemporary civilization. From all these travels, I started to collect things, objects and ideas from around the world, which I was bringing to my bohemian Portobello flat in London. When in London, and when I wasn't partying, I started developing a strong interest for design through rearranging some of these objects by changing their shape, use, color, etc. Although I was always surrounded by visual artists, my interest was more of a practical nature. It was almost like trying to work out how things are put together. This interest and obsession was focused on my living surroundings that, if I may say so, my flat became a fine example of retro and kitsch in the 1990s, being photographed for interior design magazines all over the world. This made sense. I was always interested in domestic interiors, although I had very limited technical drawing skills. Only a few international interior design magazines as my portfolio with one single project, but I was happy to embark on a BA Interior Spatial Design at Chelsea College. The course was very architectural driven, and we were taught mainly by architects. At the end of it, I knew I needed to study architecture. My design thesis then was an AIDS memorial sited in Ivory Fields in Islington. When I left Chelsea College, I went to work for the well-known Indian architect Balkrishna Doshi in Ahmedabad, Gujarat, in India, where I spent 1 year. This was, of course, an amazing opportunity to learn about culture, not to mention traveling as much as possible in India, in various trips from the north of Chandigarh to Kanyakumari in the very south, as well as renewing my visa in Nepal, which took a few weeks because I ended up trekking to the Annapurna base camp in the Himalayas. On my return to London, I started my architecture studies at UEL and then at the Architecture Association, with lots of practical work experience in between, including labor work in a project designed by Sir Norman Foster. My design thesis at School of Architecture was titled Urban Den, and was inspired in the theory of architecture of foam by the philosopher Peter Sloterdijk. I started by taking time off work to go from shop to shop selling the Hearts for Bishop greeting cards, to convince myself that I could do this. As for the online gallery, we felt the need to do events, and in our first year, we were invited to curate the art exhibition for the Earls Court Festival, and that's how I met Lola Perrin and discovered amazing minimalist music. By the end of 2008, the online gallery wasn't enough, and I had lost my interest in practicing architecture. By mid-2009, we set up a small gallery space in Gabriel's Wharf in the South Bank, where Bishop Gallery operates and holds regular art exhibitions and events. And we are currently looking to relocate to a bigger and better place very soon. Of course, my love for traveling has joined my art interest by creating an international profile for the gallery, and since we opened, we have exhibited in art fairs in London, Paris, Brussels, Amsterdam, Milan, New York, Chicago, Toronto, and Singapore. This is my way of addressing my curiosity and dealing with isolation. I would like to finish with a quote by Essential Iron. London creates the facility in which to reflect on our background from a distance. And I would like to also introduce John Kennedy, the Australian artist who regularly collaborates with Lola Perrin and designed the imagery for tonight's event and Lola's latest book titled Collection. Thank you.
Thank you, Antonio. I wish to begin by expressing how deeply honoured I am to be here today. It was actually perfectly timed, and it was a complete coincidence that the actual show timed with my journey here to England from Australia. I'd also like to add how delighted I am that despite the fact that Lola Perrin and I have been sharing our work and collaborating since 2005, tonight will mark the first time that I've witnessed Lola Perrin perform her wonderful music in person. From the very beginning, we knew that our mutual understanding and appreciation of each other's work was self-evident. As part of Lola Perrin's music is a response to the visual world. A large portion of my art is a response to her music. Lola's musical fluidness, the notational phrases that effortlessly flow between the natural and city landscapes, from the microscopic to the complexities of the human emotions, these are just samples of why Lola Perrin's music is so important to my work. I can begin by drawing the movement of the pen with the music, with no preconceived notion as to what I am producing from the beginning. And though there's aspects of her music that has elements of minimalism, my responses are not necessarily the same, no different to the complexities of a spider web that's produced, or with the complexities of an ant's nest, that even these complexities exist in complete simplicity. Most of my drawings are produced in a state of motion and journey, and I guess a sense of displacement. on trains or airlines, and rarely in a fixed place, to go with the motion of the music. All other times I will draw images just from plain Lola's music in my head. It's been part of the way I've been working for many years now. And you could say that her music has indeed become part of the soundtrack to my visual world. In relation to tonight's performance, Lola Perrin kindly commissioned me to produce a drawing titled The Sea of Names. That was a response to a debate organised by the designer, Hussein Shelian, highlighting the question of what makes London such a magnet for the artistic community throughout the world. Through 190 stories, I then improvised an intricate tapestry of intertextual images. On reading the stories, my immediate response, as I composed this drawing, was the idiosyncratic qualities from each participant. Looking at myself, though I do live in Australia, my cultural or national identity would not resemble the Australia you see on a map. If you drew my map, it would begin with a small plot of land where I was born in Birmingham, in England. This border would then extend to a small yard in a town called Albion Park Rail in Australia, where I grew up as a child. As I grew older, more places around Australia began to appear. In my adult years, it crossed the seas to a Hellenistic theatre in Paphos, Cyprus, where I worked as an archaeological illustrator, to the pyramids in Egypt. And also then it would extend where myself and my girlfriend Eliza travelled to the Louvre in Paris, to an old haunted fortress in Holland. Having my face numbed by the strong winds against the drifts of the winds of the cliffs of Moher in Ireland, and finally standing here this evening. My country and my place is where my stories come from and where I have journeyed. As reflected in the Sea of Names, London is a place that is much bigger than its own physical geography. It is a place where millions of cultural identities and millions of individual stories are rolled into one. The fragility of the line work in the drawings and the motion of the drawing is a response to my belief that basically that this is a country that you cannot actually possess it, and by sealing it in marble or gold, that it is a place that allows the breath of motion and the breath of storytelling and the breath of change. London certainly does exhibit a continually evolving ecosystem of cultural diversity, and art plays a vital role to help reinforce the importance of not just acknowledging the individual story, but embracing it. Thank you.
In tonight's show, we'll be presenting tales from the families of 190 anonymous Londoners. These tales were collected from the audience members at Hussein Chalian's Design Museum debate at Shoreditch Town Hall. We ran a questionnaire there in which we asked audience members to give anonymous information about their families going back 3 generations. We wanted to know about these Londoners. Where were they born? To what nationality did they feel they most belonged? What were their earliest memories? Who were their grandparents and parents? And where did they come from? Where did they live? And what did they do? But first, to the present-day lives of debate audience. Hussein Chalian spoke to them of London, how it's a magnet for creative people from all around the world, and how it is so full of cultural diversity that he feels London. He feels the capital as if it's a rhythm. Hussein's fellow speaker, the architect Farshid Musavi, also spoke of London's achievement. She wished she could draw a section through the patterns made by all our travel routes as we go about our daily business. Indeed, examined closely, the complicated travel routes that we take in our daily lives make for inspiringly intricate patterns. In our questionnaire, we asked our audience, where had they been to that day in March, and what had they been doing? They've been at home in Lewisham, at work in Sloane Square, then home again, shopping in Canary Wharf and to a pub, at home in a garden through some streets in North London and High Wycombe. They've knitted on a do-bead machine all day, to the gym in Brondesbury, a supermarket in Kilburn, the tube to Notting Hill, and to Liverpool Street, to Walthamstow Strental, Stoke Newington, Manor Road, Hoe Street, East London, West London, Central London, having coffee with their partner's mother, studying. They've seen clients in Tottenham Court Road at Centre Point. They've cycled to Golden Lane Estate, the area for their new project. They've gone to Wandsworth and Knightsbridge, Curtain Road, Bromley by Bow, Angel, Spitalfields Market. They've been to Clapham Junction Station, Isleworth Station, Vauxhall, Old Street, Uxbridge, and Kingston. They walked from Essex Road to work at Oxford Circus, and then they took the tube, the Central Line and the Northern Line. They've been to Tower Bridge to see houseboats, then Exmouth Market, and then walked to the Barbican, Finchley Road Tube, Marylebone Street, then King's Cross to Baker Street. They were shopping the sales, then coffee with 3 friends, then to Victoria, Hyde Park, South Kensington, Fulham Road, Notting Hill, doing research. They've been to work in their studio in Bethnal Green, Holborn, Covent Garden, Liverpool Street, Pott Street, Curtain Road, Columbia Road, Shoreditch for pattern cutting, Kingston, Euston, Hampton Wick. They've made a shirt and been on the Piccadilly line to Piccadilly Circus, New Cross Gate, Overground to London Bridge, and then Hotel, Jubilee line to Green Park, Victoria line to Pimlico, the 4:36 bus to the bus garage, Eltham, Harpenden and Tulse Hill, Buddhist meditation, swimming in North London, then hospital in the morning, tube and bus. They went to Brick Lane for bagels. They've made a leather wallet, opened their silicone molds, and met a collaborator. They've been to Leighton, Gospel Oak, Crystal Palace, in Soho, and in the rain and at work in their office. They've walked along the river, Gray's Inn Road, and then to a meeting near Archway. They've walked down Harrow Road to Porchester Spa, worked out, home to Warwick Avenue, discovered 2 new cafes and a garden centre before a tube to Farringdon. The street looked darker from the clouds, and the wind made them wish they'd worn something warmer. 190 individuals, all linked by a trail of connected first memories. Cyprus on a plane, coming to London, spending the last 4 hours in India before leaving, painting in New Delhi, playing football in Battersea, playing on the beach in Brighton, playing in the woods in northern Italy, climbing an apple tree in a North London garden, climbing a tree in Lithuania, eating small sweet apples they called sugary, in their garden in Maputo, looking for one of their mother's rings. They couldn't see the unicorn in the field, great Yarmouth, and riding a donkey, a cat jumping onto their baby brother's pram, and their mother running out into the garden, waving her arms to scare it away, with her apron flapping, being stung by a bee in the garden, watching the Apollo rocket launch on a black and white TV in Manchester, the TV set falling on their brother's head in the south of England, having a nosebleed on their white mittens. The blood was so red, and the mittens were so white. Watching someone's palm bleeding in a town called Drama, northern Greece. Parents arguing, and their mother throwing boiled potatoes at their father. One hit their shiny new red boots. Patches of strawberry red on the white wallpaper in their bedroom. Light shining through a pair of polka dot print curtains in the nursery. At home in Taipei, the sun streaming through the bedroom window in their old house in South London. In Singapore, lying in bed and listening to the comforting sound of traffic on the expressway, 8 stories down. Standing up on their cot in Dagenham, being in their crib in California, having an afternoon nap, and hearing their mother down the hall saying, "Surely," or "Shirley," on the phone, lying in a pram in Yorkshire under the clock in their parents' house. They remember singing in their pram. In a swimming pool, in a red ruche swimsuit in an outback country town called Narrabin. In Corboda, Spain, on the back seat of a green Cortina, touching a violet mushroom. In Finland, the summer blue sky. The first time they saw the Eiffel Tower, sitting in a thunderstorm in Jamaica. Being at the family shack on the east coast of Tasmania at Easter. Being in a car with their mother on a really hot day in Victoria, Australia. Picking up pegs in the backyard of their home on their farm in South Auckland, looking over Jerusalem. Dust in sunlight swirling and falling in Middlesex. Swimming in the sea at their country house in Greece. Making up songs in Norway about fishes when crossing a lake in the mountains to get to a cottage on a rainy day. Their whole family is there, and the boat has orange dots. Being lost on Scarborough Beach, being banged in the nose by a door handle, biting a girl on the cheek at nursery school, spitting out their great aunt's lemon meringue pie, tripping over Grandad's foot and falling through the coffee table. John Lennon's death announced on the news. Their mother slipping on a plastic bag and falling down the stairs while carrying them in Somerset. Being carried up a hill to Tyndall Monument in Somerset. Going down to the ice cream shop with their mum. Being in their nana's kitchen in Shoreham by Sea. At their grandparents' house in Cyprus. In Serbia, at their grandparents' house. In a basement, their brother is crying. In their London home, their dad asks, "What would you like to do when you get big?" And they say, "I want to open the front door." cousins, siblings, aunts, uncles, grandparents, parents of our 190 families, stretch around the globe and back again. Hussein, Seville, Yanis, Angel, Juanito, Jeremiah, Nigeria, Lancashire, Gujarat, Naples, Philomena, Ingeborg, born Hubbard, Paris, Watford, Taiwan, Ghana, Imad, Hupfoy, Gracilia, Anishal, Sweden, Leicester, Malaysia, Australia, Toure, Sophia, Mohammed, Hajira, Norway, Country Tyrone, Bingley, Cape Verde Islands, Sky, Jim, Jen, Ekta, Indonesia, Great Yarmouth, Southern China, Peckham, Hassan, Farid, Joya, Tiki, Leamington Spa, Denmark, the Caribbean, the Lake District, Ali, Senez, Refik, Melvin, Pakistan, Walthamstow Village, Czech Republic, Philippines, Ludwig, Bergen, Kizzy, Earl, Doncaster, Ukraine, Buenos Aires, Hong Kong, Chris, Fritzy, Louise, Diamantis, French Colonial Empire, Latin America, Stoke-on-Trent, Singapore, Randy, Esco, Enelli, Timo, Washington, D.C., Fulham, Dublin, Newcastle, Eugenia, Barry, Oliver, Edith, Calabria, Derbyshire, Jammu, Vancouver, May, Norman, Henry, Benedict, Kenya, East Germany, Stepney, Glasgow, Cliff, Annie, Elena, Glynis, Mornington Road in Leytonstone, Ohio, Austria, Mozambique, Care, Ed, David, Borgheld, Netherlands, Baghdad, Burma, Hawaii, Brian, Lynn, Glenn, Heather, Montserrat, Pennsylvania, Vietnam, Southall, Betty, Beverly, Baldwin, Henry, James, Jane. line of labor crossing 100 years, from our grandparents to our parents, and then on to us. A soldier, a mystic, a smallholder, a station master, a factory worker, a crofter, a navy captain, a lighthouse keeper, a cook and a seamstress, a cheesemaker, a barber, a missionary, a greengrocer, a parts designer for the Spitfire, a lipstick packer, a printer, a fireman, a diver, a cleaner, a clockmaker, a steel worker, a miner, a butcher, a ballet dancer, a politician, a jeweler, a cobbler, a lagger, a flower farmer, a bookies runner, a thermometer maker, a docker, a radio operator, a poet, a merchant seaman, a spy, a football manager, a pilot, a silversmith, an opera singer, a master pentathlete, a radiographer, an airport mechanic, a vascular surgeon, an artist, a piano tuner, a piano teacher, a racing driver, a mother of 6, a mother of 5, a petrol pump designer, a furrier, a press officer for a president, a welder, a landscape gardener, a fantasy footballer, a mathematician, a police officer, a lawyer, a joiner, a nuclear power station engineer, a wheeler dealer, a radiographer, a cricketer, a housekeeper, a dressmaker, a figure skater, a draftswoman, a postman, an ice cream van man, a journalist, a dentist, a pharmacist, a geologist, a physicist, a muralist, an industrialist, a psychologist turned professional tango singer, a midwife, an undertaker. Thank you for tuning in. That was Lola Perrin on the piano, and I'm Mihir Bose. Good night.